Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the Accelerator with Michael Conniff. That's me. This is a podcast devoted to entrepreneurs, startups, founders, and all things related, and also to the angels, VCs, and family offices and investment firms that keep a close tab on them. We now have two podcasts. This is the Accelerator. We also have the Angel. Check them out on all the major platforms. Rate us, rank us, all kinds of things you can do to help us out. Share our podcast. We like that too. And we're actually doing really well. We've got thousands of emails going out and a very high open rate, which I'm thrilled about. So lots of people are starting to listen in and catch up to this podcast. Today, we're doing something a little different for us. We're usually one-on-one, but now we are one-on-three with Ryan Scott Coles. He's a UConn entrepreneurial, or rather a professor of entrepreneurship at UConn, University of Connecticut in Stores. He also is the founder and chief scientist at Daigle Labs. And he's done us the favor. First of all, hello, Ryan. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike. It's exciting to be here.
Thank you and a very interesting program he's put together up in Stores. And we are joined by two of his founders, Masil. Mallem is the CTO of Patent. Help me out, Pat. I just wrote it down. I've got it somewhere.
Patent Plus AI.
Patent Plus AI, and also Peter Goggins, the founder and CEO of Pisces Atlantic. Thank you both for being here. Really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you, Michael.
Okay, great to be here. We're going to start with you, Professor Coles. I love titles, so we'll go with that.
Yeah, I love it.
I'm interested if you could give us, kind of a synopsis of you and how you got here, and then I'll ask about the very interesting stuff going on there, and then we're going to get to the founders. Okay, so you kick us off, Ryan. How did you get here? I know you studied organizational management at Cornell. Originally, you studied at Brigham Young, but what got you interested in all of this startup stuff from an organizational management standpoint?
Yeah, I think it started with, 2011, I hopped on a startup, and it was international. So international entrepreneurship, where you're in a startup, but you've got operations on an international level from day one. And this was a volunteerism startup. And we happened to be operating in the Middle East. We were trying to facilitate internships for undergraduates to the Middle East. We were our own independent company. And if you remember about the Middle East in 2011, that's when you had all the revolutions from the Arab Spring. Mm-hmm. So, we didn't anticipate that happening, but it happened, and we ran our program anyway. But the whole experience kind of opened my eyes about what was needed to try to start a company in general, let alone trying to start a company that was operating in a different, in multiple countries. And I remember we had on our board kind of guys that had their MBA, really typical American business backgrounds, and then we had some sociologists. And when it came time to get the company registered in Jordan, we got conflicting advice. So the guys with MBAs on the board kind of pointed to which government ministries we needed to go to, the paperwork we needed to do. And then these sociologists were like, no, actually what you need to do is go out into the countryside of Jordan, spend time with the leaders of these Bedouin tribes in these tents with camels, and that'll help you get this company legally registered in Jordan. And it was, very weird. And I think I attribute this, sometimes being young and dumb in entrepreneurship is a good thing. And for whatever reason, because I was 24 at the time, whatever reason, we decided to follow the sociologist's advice, even though as an American on face value, it sounded weird. But it ended up working. And we ended up being able to get up and running in Jordan a lot more quickly and ahead of other much larger organizations, to the point where they were like knocking on our door saying, how the hell did you guys jump us in line? You're this small nobody of a company and you're all in your mid-20s. And that really opened my eyes around culture, power structure, right? Informal power structure, social networks, and how those are structured in a country and how that plays a role in business. And that's when I said to myself, I want to understand this better
Mm.
so that I can help other companies, startup or otherwise, learn how to grow and grow through a strategy of internationalization. And so that's when I picked up doing some doctoral work at Cornell and kind of dedicated myself for 6 years on these types of topics.
Mm.
Came to UConn and started this lab with the help of Kyle Daigle. He's the COO of GitHub. And I think,
Mm.
with Peter and Masil here, you can, I think, with some of their stories of what we've been doing, see some of the success that we've had.
Yeah, and you're a professor, so you're assume you're teaching courses, and you also and I think these guys are part of what you call your foundry. Is that right?
Yeah,
So
that's right. So I teach an entrepreneurship course, and we cover the gambit on coming up with a business idea and getting it off the ground. And then the foundry is the focal point of our lab. That's where we, as a team, take what we learn about starting a business and experiment with building businesses around science and technology breakthroughs. So, like in Masil's case with Patent Plus AI, that's AI, but we'll also do other types of science, not just computer science. We'll do biology and environmental science. So, like Peter's
mm,
invention with Pisces Atlantic, right?
yeah, yeah, no, and I should point out you're a professor at the business school, right? So these are MBA candidates, is that right?
Masil and Peter, no, they're graduated, and they're. Let's see, Masil, yours was engineering, your undergraduate degree. Peter, environmental science, and then you just finished a master's in engineering in global venturing, right? Right.
Okay, great. So they've kind of gone through your program. Now, Masil Mallem is co-founder and CEO of Patent Plus AI. So, Masil, tell us what your company does, and also tell us. I'm assuming it helped to be part of the UConn Foundry, but help us understand sort of what that process was. But how did you come up with the idea for Patent AI? And where do you stand right now? How far have you gotten?
Yeah, absolutely. So the idea originally it was born out of a co-op I did when I was a chemical engineering student at UConn. So the co-op, for people who don't know, is just an internship that you do during the school year. So you're maintaining your full-time student status, but you're working full-time, a company or law firm, etc. For me, it was working at a company in their IP department, so their intellectual property department. And they're like, a chemical engineering company. They make, fibers that go into surgical masks, gowns, oil filters, stuff like that. So I remember I was just procrastinating for my organic chemistry exam once, didn't want to study, I was tired. So I go through my emails and I find like a listing for the co-op looking for PhD chemistry students or law students. And I'm like, why would you ever put those two in the same sentence? It made no sense to me. But although I was studying chemical engineering, I loved law since I was a little boy, always wanted to go to law school. So long story short, I discovered the world of intellectual property and immediately fell in love with it. During the job, one of the biggest tasks that I was responsible for was patent searching or prior art searching. And it's an integral part of the whole legal system when it comes to making inventions and protecting your intellectual property. And it's very difficult to do. Patent searching you'll have to do for any invention if you want to make, use, or sell it in a particular jurisdiction. You have to do it if you want to invalidate a foreign patent of a competitor. Without getting too much details, but it's very difficult to do. And what we used to do in our company is either outsource or do it internally, in-house. And outsourcing tends to be a bit like it takes a long time, 2 to 3 weeks. People who are doing the patent searching when you outsource are not technical experts of the invention. They're just data scientists, and they just throw human hours at the problem. In-house searching takes also a long time, but it's also very tedious, and you have other things to do. So me and my best friend Jake, we also met, engineering house, learning community, freshman year at UConn. Big passion about AI and technology innovation. And yeah, we decided to found a company to use AI to at first help people with patent searching, but now we're fully fledged on towards the path of completely automating the process or as much as we can and having AI perform the patent search, give you the report, and then let you, strategize and move forward after that.
And
And yeah,
where does the company stand now in terms of progress, customers, traction, stage?
absolutely. Absolutely. So the stage that we're in right now, probably best defined as beta testing. So we have three pilot programs that we're doing with potential clients. Making reports for them, doing projects for them, and then go over accuracy, update things because it's a very difficult process. And although the technology is there, there's a lot of due diligence that has to be done because the decisions that are made after the patent search reports are generated are very impactful. So we want to make sure that the accuracy is as good as possible before we proceed. So we're being cautious and careful because at the end of the day, we are dealing with people's intellectual property.
Yes, I
It's pretty
love.
amazing. Like,
Go ahead, Ryan.
oh, go ahead.
No, you go
I
ahead.
was gonna say, it's pretty amazing what's been built. Masil, it typically takes what, 3 weeks for
Yes,
someone
sir.
to get a patent search report back, and 3 weeks, and how much was it?
Bare minimum 500, most likely $1,000 and 3 weeks of wait to get a report.
We can do it in 3 hours.
Wow, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell my wife she was the general counsel at ASCAP, the music public performance rights um,
Okay.
uh, nonprofit, and she actually went all over the world negotiating digital rights. And to my great dismay, she's no longer in IP and is now in real estate. Uh, but what an interesting time to be in IP. I felt that way even before ChatGPT came out. And
Yeah.
now, of course, all the turmoil that's caused. Now, let me ask Peter. Peter Goggins is a founder and CEO of Pisces Atlantic, and is also coming out of this UConn program. Peter, tell us what your company does and what kind of progress you're making.
Yeah, we manufacture high-tech, sustainably produced fish meal-free fish feeds. So I
Okay,
got
let me
started on
stop for a second. Fish meal free fish feeds.
correct. Yes,
Say that five times fast. Fish meal free
Feel free
fish
to ask.
feed. So
Yeah,
you feed fish. You feed fish without
feed fish.
giving them fish.
No, yeah. So
Yeah,
that's a
actually,
small fact, right? Not many people know.
yes.
Is that right?
And feel free to ask Masil. He's my Arabic translator, and I'm pretty sure that most of the hair on his head is going to be missing by the time we stop working together, due to the difficulties of translating those sort of phrases into different languages.
Yeah. So it's you're feeding fish, and what instead of you told us what it isn't. So what is it? What are you using to
Yeah,
feed fish?
we use all sorts of emerging protein sources. So that includes yeast byproducts, fungal meals, food waste byproducts, insect meal is a really big one, brewery waste, stuff like that. We use that to replace fish meal, which has traditionally been the main component in the feeds used for farmed fish. But due to some resource availability problems that they've run into in the last 10 years or so, the price has tripled in that time.
And what's the advantage of using your fish meal rather than the more traditional style?
It depends on who you ask, but most people are going to cite the price. We're very competitive on price.
Is it healthier for the fish? Is it easier? Are there other benefits as well?
Yeah, yeah. We're the only feed compared to a feed that contains fish meal. We're mercury free, right? Because fish meal contains a lot of mercury. We don't have any. We don't have that same vector in our feeds.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're a lot of fish are farmed for conservation purposes, right? So they're grown by state or federal conservation agencies and then released into the wild. You have all sorts of selection bias when you feed juvenile fish meal when they wouldn't eat that in the wild. So I mean, again, we could get really technical about it, but it depends on who the customer is and what they're looking for. But generally speaking, price is a big one, and then environmental and health concerns are usually pull up the secondary and tertiary spots.
And what kind of traction have you achieved with the company, and what stage are you in?
Yeah, we're well into the commercialization stage, right? So we about a year ago, we started working in the context of the Foundry, and at that time we were just sort of beta testing, that sort of getting out of the lab onto the market, learning a little bit about what it was like to try and sell, and we were hitting a bunch of roadblocks, right? Because we were making 100-pound, 100-kilo, all kinds of small trifling sales, no problem, right? And then it was like, okay, let's scale this up. And there was nowhere in the 2-ton range that we could find. Everybody we talked to was like, yeah, that product sounds really cool. We use 6 tons a day. And it was like,
Wow.
we can produce a couple tons a month. There was a really big disconnect. And when we started working with the Foundry, that's when we started selling abroad. So right now we're working in Egypt, getting started in Oman, Jordan. Jordan was the driest country in the world, right? That's where we got started for real. And
You have some
in
great
Iraq.
connection. You have these great connections to the Bedouins in Jordan, right? So you've got that locked up.
Yeah, and then also
absolutely.
and then also in South America, from my 2 years living there.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's where Peter and I recognized there was this gap in the domestic market, and so you can't jump from here to here. We needed to find those clients in between, and that's when we had that insight. They're not here; they're in foreign countries.
Yeah.
So let's go there, and it's kind of classic disruption theory, right? Let's go to these niche markets where we can get traction and then grow.
Sure. And Ryan, I first wanted to ask Peter about the stage you're in is you're a business. You've got customers, you've got product.
Yep.
What's the next step for you?
Fulfillment. So we've locked down just about 10 million USD in sales in the last 5 months.
It's fantastic. Congratulations.
Yeah, it is. But much like Masil, I'm going to be hairless soon. In that I'm pulling my hair out because we're in the fulfillment stage, right? You've got all sorts of logistics, manufacturing. The biggest one is paperwork. Having products approved for sale in different markets. So we're in the thick of it.
Yeah, the complexity of that business sounds staggering. Now, Ryan, what you're have this very interesting program at UConn. You're running the labs and the Foundry. They're two different things, right? They're not the same thing.
Well, the Foundry is part of Daigle Labs.
It's part of the labs. Okay.
We do the academic research, but the Foundry is where we apply it, right? So we do the research around how to build businesses, and the Foundry is where we actually take that knowledge and get in the trenches and help build some science-based ventures.
Just for people, obviously the notion of a Foundry has been around. People have heard that word, but how do you define it in the startup context?
Yeah, so Foundry, I think, is an older English word for factory or manufacturing. So a startup foundry is, where we are, building or manufacturing startups, right? Turning out startups. And some of our projects are fairly early stage or ground up. So we have some projects in the Foundry where we are taking our own published research, trying to build businesses around it, or other people's published research to try to build businesses around it with them. Or sometimes it's companies like Peter's, where they were operating for 5 to 6 years, but didn't have maybe the social network access to go to these foreign markets and really take off. Some, I think Patent Plus AI is another area where it was very, very early stage, much earlier than Pisces, where the key thing is they needed quick 20K to get, for example, the data they needed to build a tool that could actually do full, patent search, right? And so we were able to get them, we call them pivot grants, right? Because a lot of times these startups come to these critical moments where you're not going to be able to get a loan. You're not going to get an angel investor or a VC to invest yet. But a $2,000 grant that you're used to getting at some of typical university programs also isn't enough. You need $25,000, to buy this data set, right? And those are critical moments.
Is the pivot grant a UConn grant? Is it part of your program? How does that work?
Yeah, so this is part of the Foundry. This is, part of what, when we dig in with startups, we're more in the trenches with them. But part of that is we're able to bring some funds that have a bit more heft to them, because so often really great ideas and really great business ideas, not just a great tool, but they're great business ideas, don't get off the ground because funding, right? And, it makes sense that a private investor wouldn't throw money at it yet, right? But if you can get stronger grants behind it, right? Like 25,000 to get that data set, and have a coach or a PI that's working with them, in the case of actually making social network connections, flying with them and sitting in, with sales calls with them, helping them land clients, we can build that pipeline. We can get a company that otherwise might not get off the ground, actually off the ground.
So
that's why I like the word foundry. It's more involved in an incubator, accelerator.
It's an interesting concept. So Masil, in your case, what would you have done without the Foundry? Is one way of asking this. Would you be here today, Masil?
For sure. Yeah, I think we are a good example of the functionality of the pivot grants, because to kind of give you a bit of more perspective, in order to search the patent database, obviously you have to have access to it. A lot of the patent documents are publicly available. By definition, a patent is a contract between you and the government, wherein you tell them how you make your invention and they protect it for you. But it's very difficult to aggregate the patent archives from 196 different countries, however many patent jurisdictions, and keep them updated on a day-to-day basis, because these things change. Not just when a new patent is filed or granted, but because of litigation and things like that, you have to update the patent database on a regular basis, and you need to have access to everything in a way that is easier for the AI systems to kind of like go through, look at the claims, analyze that. We at first, before the Foundry, bootstrapped and kind of just used Upwork and student interns in computer science to help us scrape data off of the USPTO website, for example, to extract that patent information. But it takes a lot of time. And it costs us a couple $1,000s to get it just for America without the updates, nowhere else in the world. And but we're using it to test and to search, but we could only search in America.
And Peter,
yeah, and if I could just quickly wrap up with the pivot grant. Yeah. The alternative, which is what our biggest companies in this industry are doing, is use like a service that does all of that data aggregation for you, finds it for everywhere in the world, organizes it for you, and allows you to access it, update it every day, etc. But it cost a lot of money. It was $95,000 for us to be able to basically, finish our R&D and be able to start doing, beta testing and do projects for our customers. And that's where Dego Labs came in. And Ryan is like, yeah, if this is kind of the bottleneck, like I will destroy that bottleneck for you, and you focus on actually, building the product. And we managed to get them down from 95,000 to 20,000. And the lab, gave us that grant. So we got access to the data, same quality data that, PatSnap or any big players in the industry are using. And, it allows us to not only build the product well and train it well, but also search on the entire global patent database.
And Peter, I have, it's amazing how fast time goes when you have three guests. We're kind of at the end here, but at least for this podcast. But Peter, you came into the Foundry at a much later stage, it sounds like. So what help did you get?
For me, the biggest insight was or the biggest take was all that work we put into identifying where's there a mid-sized market, where's some place that we can expand to, because realistically I spent a year and a half banging my head up against a wall trying to get out of the 100 kilos there, 100 pounds here and there type of set. You can't, that's not productive, that's not going anywhere. So that was definitely the biggest thing for me, where it was those flights and those, sit, here, I'm going to sit you down. We're going to work through this meeting together, in Jordan, Iraq, Egypt, all sorts of Peru, all sorts of places.
Yeah. And Ryan, put these two fellows, these two CEOs, these two founders in the context of your whole program. How many companies typically are in the Foundry at a given time? And what's sort of your ambitions for it moving forward?
Yeah, great question, Mike. Right now, we've got 5 companies that we're working on in the Foundry actively. And I'd love to expand that to where we can consistently support, 8 to 10 projects.
Mm-hmm.
But my expectation is I like to know that we have at least $25,000 a year to spend on each startup project. Mm-hmm. So a couple of things that are unique. One, we'd like to bring more of a lab logic, viewpoint into our Foundry. We are experimenting with building startups, right? And so we like to have what we call a lead PI who works with the founders. But that also means we don't have a timetable. So we plan on sometimes, if we want to work with a startup to get it off the ground for 1, 2, or 3 years, we'll do that. Especially if we get an STTR grant from the U.S. government, we're going to be working with them for a couple of years. So we'd like to know that for a project, we can have at least $25K a year to dedicate towards getting the business ready, where it can go get external funding, or even just stand on its own 2 feet. Mm-hmm. And so our ambition right now is to move to where we can support 8 projects beyond the 5 that we have.
That would be great. And I think that we'll probably see more programs like this. But for Peter and for Masil, is there a point where you can kind of I don't want to say move on from the Foundry, but at what is the kind of criteria for graduating from a program like this? Is this a lifetime relationship? I mean, I'm sure it will be in terms of personal terms, but is there a moment where you kind of step away from the nest? Pardon me, I should use a fish analogy, but I don't know fish.
That's right. Yeah.
Fish analogy, where you swim away or whatever. But I'm not even going to try. But is there a point? I'll start with you, Peter, where you'll know it's time and you'll know where you're moving on, that kind of thing.
I think the important context here is to circle back to what Ryan said about this being more of a lab type context than a true, say, VC or accelerator, right? Yeah. Because the understanding is always that, like, when you need help, assistance, right, you can circle in and out of the lab as is needed, right? And obviously for me, the amount of active support needed will decrease, right? As I get better and better at fulfilling these contracts, there'll be fewer and fewer hair on fire moments, like, oh my God, it's a little customs, that type of thing, right? Yeah. But a year from now, right, I have plans to launch some more R&D, right? And that would probably be a good time to reapproach the lab and say, like, hey, like, we're thinking about launching this new product line, help us commercialize it, bring us back up to the same network, that type of thing.
Yeah. And how about you, Masil? How does this evolve for you?
Yeah, exactly. Like Peter said, I love the lab analogy. As someone who's done, undergraduate research for 2 years, I think this is the exact kind of philosophy that needs to apply to entrepreneurship to make it more efficient and get, better results and be quicker with things. I will answer it even outside of Patent Plus because Peter kind of addressed that. I also wear multiple hats in the lab. So I'm working as a translator for Ryan, go all the different types of countries, working with Parties Atlantic and other startups there. So I've, and I work with other startups. So whatever kind of intellectual needs I have, the labs fulfills for me. So I'm not going anywhere.
Oh, that's great. So So I want to remind our viewers, this is the Accelerator podcast with Michael Conniff. We're on all the major platforms. We're on YouTube and Spotify, both audio and video. Otherwise, Audible, Amazon, Apple, virtually any kind of platform for podcasts you can think of. Make sure to like us, rate us, review us. You can also find out more about me at my website, michaelconniff.com. That's MichaelConniff.com. And I want to thank our guest today. The time has flown by. Our guest, Peter Goggins from Pisces Atlantic, Masil Mallem from Patent Plus AI, and Professor Ryan Scott Coles from the University of Connecticut Business School, where he teaches entrepreneurship in many forms. So thank you all for being here. This has been a lot of fun, and we'd love to follow up and learn more about you as you move along. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. It's
Thank
a
you,
pleasure.
Michael.
And thank you, everyone, for listening to The Accelerator. And as I always like to say at the end of these podcasts, we'll be back with another one before you know it. Thanks.